not waiting, but acting. It is not at all passive. It involves strikes, boycotts, non-cooperation, mass demonstrations, and sabotage, as well as appeals to the conscience of the world, even to individuals in the oppressing group who might break away from their past. Direct action does not deride using the political rights, the civil liberties, even the voting mechanisms in those societies where they are available. But it recognizes the limitations of those controlled rights and goes beyond.
The law is not a holy thing. I remember when Dan Berrigan broke the law and they interviewed his 80-year-old mother and they said, "Oh, what do you think about your son? What do you think about him breaking the law?" I guess they thought an 80-year-old woman would have 80 years of respect for the law behind her and she'd give them the right answer. And Dan Berrigan's mother said, "It's not God's law." And she had it there. The law is made by very mortal people, very limited people, very opinionated people, and people who have very special interests. They make the law, they tell us what the law is, and then they act as if it's holy writ.
A lot of people are troubled by civil disobedience. As soon as you talk about committing civil disobedience, they get a little upset. That's exactly the purpose of civil disobedience. To upset people, to trouble them, to disturb them. We who commit civil disobedience are disturbed too, and we mean to disturb those who are in charge of the war.
He said at the end of his speech, I remember, he said, "Now let me address the secret police in this crowd."
You agents of the FBI who are circulating in the crowd. Hey, don't you see that you're violating the spirit of democracy by what you're doing? Don't you see that you're behaving like the secret police of a totalitarian state?
Well, that cost him a bit, I think, the next day when we were sitting in front of the Federal Building, I have a feeling. Because, again, the police chose in the end to arrest almost no one. They didn't want arrest, they didn't want a trial, they didn't want the publicity that would be associated with that. They only arrested a couple of ringleaders, and one of those was Howard.
And so, let the spirit of disobedience spread to the war factories, to the battlefields, to the halls of Congress, every town and city, until the killing stops, until we can hold up our heads again before the world. Because our children deserve a world without war, and we ought to try to give them that.
And at that point, the batons were raised and they began clubbing us very heavily. Howard was pulled up, as I say, his shirt was ripped apart, he was taken away, and I saw blood coming down his chest as he left.
Let us be nonviolent. We are going to be protesting against violence. We may break some petty laws. We may interfere slightly with business as usual, but these are not terrible crimes. There are terrible crimes being committed, but sitting down and locking arms, that's no terrible crime. War is the great crime of our age.
Most people don't confront the challenge to go to jail, but they often confront a challenge to do the right thing or to say the truth at the risk of their jobs. And they usually don't choose, I would say, to risk their careers very much, partly because they don't have examples of that. They don't. The courage of that sort is contagious, and they may or may not have the luck to meet somebody who is exhibiting that kind of courage.
Boston University was this great center of anti-war activity, and then in 1971, John Silber arrives. He takes a different view of the university. He takes a different view of protests against the war in Vietnam. He's sort of a university president, but also a policeman.
It took exceptional conditions for the faculty at BU to decide to form a union. And those exceptional conditions, I think, were the goading, the aggravation, the outlandish provocations of the Silber administration.
I did know people who were in the BU administration who felt that Howard, their side of it was that Howard was disloyal, that he refused to cross the picket line when the clerical workers were on strike. And Howard said, "You're damn right I did, because I had solidarity with these people, and I wasn't going to cross their picket line. And I would teach my classes that maybe outside of the school." But that's the kind of thing that President Silber wouldn't accept.
I went to Boston University 72 to 76, arrived there in 72, the year after John Silber got there. He did not know what to do with you, because he was trying to create this powerful Harvard on the other side of the river, and there you were, but you were the most popular professor on campus, and I just wanted to know how it ended up.
Well, see, he was limited. He had no nuclear weapons. If he could have acquired them, he would have. This is a guy, who, we're not just talking about campus politics, right? He's a guy who believed in, sending arms to El Salvador, to the death squad government of El Salvador, and refused to give an honorary degree to Mandela, and he was. I could go on, but what happened with us? It was a standoff. He had his office and his money and his buildings and his trees, and I had these 400 students every semester. And so, it would drive him crazy, because he would not allow me to have any teaching assistants, you see. And he sent a letter. The department head, actually, the third edition first, showed me the letter we got. The letter said, "If Zinn will cut his class down to 80 students, I will give him teaching assistants." In 1979, we went on strike at Boston University. The professors went on strike, the secretaries went on strike, the librarians went on strike, the buildings and grounds workers went on strike. We had almost an IWW general strike at Boston University, and we won.
Welcome to our home.
Thank you.
Welcome. We're all waiting for you. We just had some announcements, and the students have tons of questions to ask you.
All right, I won't speak long. What do you think they're most interested in?
You can actually ask them. Our
Okay.
students are pretty open about saying what they think and what they want to know.
Okay.
So, come on right up.
When I started to write my book, my heroes were not going to be military heroes. My heroes were going to be people who fought against war, spoke out, protested against war.
Thus, in that inevitable taking of sides which comes from the selection of history, I prefer to tell the story of the discovery of America from the viewpoint of the Arawaks, of the Constitution of America from the viewpoint of the slaves, of Andrew Jackson as seen by the Cherokees, of the rise of industrialism as seen by the young women in the Lowell textile mills, of the Spanish-American War as seen by the Cubans, the conquest of the Philippines as seen by the black soldiers on Luzon, the First World War as seen from the eyes of socialists, the New Deal as seen by blacks in Harlem, and so on, to the limited extent that any one person, however he or she strains, can see history from the standpoint of others.
Any other questions about anything?
What was the reception